way to having it become that, because he is a one-man evangelist. He's a Johnny Appleseed of public banking. And he's planting public banking seeds everywhere he goes in Philadelphia. I first heard about, I'm Stan Shapiro, I'm the vice chair of Neighborhood Networks. I first heard about public banking probably 40 years ago in another life when I was an attorney at Community Legal Services. And back then, it was good to think about radical things, and we were encouraged actually to think about radical things back then. There was an organization known as the Conference of Alternative State and Local Public Policies, and they were the progressive ALEC of the time, and they had conferences and they had all kinds of publications, and they put out a publication which I searched for, which I can't find, about the Bank of North Dakota. And they really were encouraging everybody to think about public banks. And for some reason, I don't exactly know what it was, but with everything else that was going on, the Black Panthers weren't interested in public banks, and it didn't seem like a way to end the war in Vietnam. So it never got traction back then. But people have been aware of it for a lot of years, and I'm incredibly confident that we can make it happen this time. So before we introduce Mike in the program, I just want to say a few words about Neighborhood Networks, which most of you here already know. Neighborhood Networks is now collaborating with MoveOn.org, partnering with MoveOn.org in a lot of progressive campaigns in the city. And I'm not going to elaborate on all of them, but we have members in just, if you get an email about something that's going on in the city, we've got members there. Some of them are wearing those shirts that Bo back there is wearing, but they're there, they're there. But one of the key things that we recognize is that although we stand for probably all the things that the Occupy movement stood for, we're not going to get those things unless we really are organized on the ground in a clear, structured way to change some of the faces that are in Harrisburg, Washington, and in Philadelphia. We got to get people in there. We don't have to pound our heads to get to do the right thing, who arrive in office because they want to do the right thing. We got to do that. And the way we think we can do that is to organize in every division in the city of Philadelphia. We want to organize people in every division of the city of Philadelphia. If we can only do 90%, we'll be happy with that too. To get people to understand that the way they can be most effective in getting out the vote for things they care about, for candidates they know about, is not to do the hard thing, which is to travel across town to knock on the doors that some organization has told them to knock on, but to knock on the doors within walking distance of where they live. So our idea is to get as many people as possible committed to doing that, and if we can get out 25, 30, 40 extra votes in the next gubernatorial election in 300 or 400 divisions in the city, we can get the vote we need to get rid of the guy who's governor now, whose name I can't pronounce, in polite company, and then, take on the city council that defeated earned sick pay by one vote, that repealed an earned income tax credit by one vote, which refused to increase the use and occupancy tax. They didn't even have a vote on that for the schools, on the theory, some council people allege theory that don't worry about it, there's a state plan, and if the state plan doesn't work, then we'll get to it later. And you see how well that's working out. So all of these things, if we had one or two different faces in city council, all those things would be different. And we would also, hopefully we'll have it even before then, but we would also have a public bank in Philadelphia. I'm pretty convinced of that. So we have your names. Thank you very much for signing up. You're going to hear from us about how you can help get the vote out for our progressive ideals. And with that, just one other little logistical thing. After Mike talks, what we're going to do is we're going to break up into, I think, 4 groups and have a discussion about some of the details of what a public bank would look like. We really have to imagine what a public bank would look like because there's only one model. It's a good model. It's not necessarily the Philadelphia model. And we want everybody to have some say about what that's going to look like. So that's what we're going to do a little bit later. So with no further ado, Michael Kraus.
Thank you. It's great being here. I should tell you how I got here. I went to schools, public schools in Bristol Township up in Bucks County. Got a college degree in government. I worked in county government. In fact, in 1977 in Bucks County, we published Access Bucks County, which was the first survey ever of buildings available for the physically disabled. We published a thing called Access Bucks County. Actually had some part of that. Then I was offered state government, and then in the early 80s, I was exec director of the Republican State Committee of this Commonwealth. In what I like to say was a galaxy far, far away at a time long, long ago. And then I went to the private sector. And I spent 27 years moving freight around the world as an executive of a railroad, a manufacturing company, a leasing company, all that kind of stuff, and lived abroad a lot. And I was abroad mostly the last 21 years. And I came home in October of 2008. And, you know, I said, what's happening here? I really didn't understand. I mean, even though I had very responsible positions in industry and a lot of money, a lot of, P&L responsibility and returns on asset, return on investment, and judged by all that kind of stuff for some pretty big numbers, I didn't understand what happened. So I made it my business to find out. And that took me into an examination of the Federal Reserve. And I discovered that the Federal Reserve is not an organ of the federal government. It was created by the federal government, and it creates our money. And it does so through the Federal Reserve is a private stock corporation owned by the largest banks of the United States. That's what the Federal Reserve is. And all the money that comes into circulation with interest. We pay to get our own money into circulation. That's news. Now, back in the 1800s, farmers understood this. Today, college graduates do not. They don't get how and where our money is created and what burden that adds to our debt service. They don't get that at all. And they don't get that Mr. Bernanke is doing a wonderful job if you consider who he works for. He works for the largest banks. That's why he bailed out the largest banks. As far as they're concerned, he's doing a great job. Wall Street over Main Street. Now that's just information. I discovered all this as brand new information to me in 2008 and said, wow. And then I met a gal called Ellen Brown who was talking about public banking and wrote a book called Web of Debt in which she described how we got where we are. And she wanted to do something about this and had this group together, and I signed on. And we helped create the Public Banking Institute, a national organization. And then here in Pennsylvania, we created the Pennsylvania Project. They're both 501c3s, public policy education organizations. We're trying to teach the world about public banks and, this is the important part, get some established. Let me take a second to describe what a public bank is so we're clear about this. It's public because it is formed with public monies. You take public monies and capitalize a bank. That makes it a public bank. That bank then has one shareholder, the people who capitalized it. North Dakota has a public bank. It's owned by the people of North Dakota. They're the only shareholder. So when that bank turns a profit, it goes into the state's general fund as non-tax revenue. It does that. But its principal mission is to partner with local banks, community banks, credit unions, and development agencies to magnify their impact in the community, to get affordable credit distributed into the economy through the existing commercial banking structure. As we propose it, this public bank is not a commercial bank. It has no branches, no tellers, no ATMs. It doesn't originate any loans. That's done at a local bank. But let's say the local bank has a $5 million limit, and you need $10 million for a new showroom, let's say. You go to your local bank and they say, sorry, our limit's 5. And you say, geez, I'm sorry too, I'm going to go to Wells Fargo. And that bank loses a customer, not North Dakota. They say, oh, whoa, don't go anywhere, let's call the public bank and see if they like this deal. And if they do, they partner with the community bank. Or they buy down interest rates. Right now in North Dakota, a business can get a 1% loan for 5 years. 1% for 5 years. So they get their business up and running, get the cash flows where they need to be. They have a huge student loan program in North Dakota at low interest rates. No town in North Dakota has a rainy day fund. You know what that is? They're set aside for emergencies. Towns have those because they have no access to lines of credit at banks. So they have a set aside. In Bucks County, where I'm from, that's $54 million earning 0.29%. No town in North Dakota has a rainy day fund. They have a bank. And if they have trouble, they go to the bank for a very low interest loan. As for example, in 1997, there was a Grand Forks fire and flood. The Red River flooded and took out two towns, Grand Forks, Minnesota on the west bank, and Grand Forks, North Dakota on the east bank. North Dakota's public bank was on the ground with $100 million before FEMA was there. They underwrote a 6-month suspension of mortgage payments to that town and then put $100 million of low interest loans back into that town to rebuild, with this result. Grand Forks, North Dakota lost 3% of its population. Grand Forks, Minnesota lost 17%. They didn't have that bank to help them out, as for example. So a public bank partners with the existing commercial banking industry. That's its main job, to get affordable credit into the community. And what you get is locally created credit for locally directed economic development. My Republican soul likes that. I think that's a fine idea. Lots of local control. And you'd better. I think you must know, there's no help coming from Harrisburg, and there's no help coming from Washington. This city will do it for itself or it won't get done. It's just how it is. And that's not going to change anytime soon. I wish it would, but it's not going to. So, we need new tools. Right now, this city, like all cities, runs its finances this way. You can borrow more money, get more debt. You can raise taxes, nobody wants to hear about that. You can lay off, you can do that. Of course, you can cut services. Those are bad tools. I mean, borrow money, raise taxes, cut services, lay off, or ask for givebacks from your middle class employees. That's nice. Let's get even lower pay in Philadelphia. That's just what we need. I mean, that's what's going on out there. Every town's just like that, every big city in America. Well, here's a different tool in your toolkit. Here's a tool that creates non-tax revenue. Here's a tool that gets credit flowing into your local economy. And that creates jobs, development, and tax revenue. That's what it does. Over the past decade, the Bank of North Dakota, splitting its profits 50-50 with reinvestment, put $30 million a year in the state's general fund. Population 670,000 people, with an economy not nearly as diverse as this city, frankly. Really, this city has a huge economy, very varied, so it could make really good use of this kind of affordable credit. So what we're here to try and do with public banking is not tell you what your city needs. You'll decide that. We think, though, public banking is an enabler. And I'll close with it. Before a little video here, I'll close with a remark. Einstein, I forget who it was, said, definition of stupidity is doing the same things over and over again and expecting a different result. Well, doing more of the same old is not what this city needs. So everybody talks about out of the box. This is out of the box. But we're not inventing the wheel. It's in North Dakota. We just want to roll it down to Philadelphia. The model works very well, quite successfully. They've dealt with mission. They've dealt with capitalization. They've dealt with governance. This is big. How do you have a bank with your money that's accountable to the people, but independent of the politicians? Now, that's an important question. I'm sure we all agree with that. If I said I was going to give the state legislature a bank, you'd say, "You're crazy? Those guys?" I mean, you just wouldn't do it. You just wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. So that's a very big issue to address. And we're doing that. We have teams now in this city. We have a team focused on mission. This is part of that. Hearing from people to bring out your idea of mission. We have a team focused on capitalization. Where is the money going to come from? We have a team focused on governance. How are you accountable but yet independent? We have a team focused on projecting returns, all the startup. And here is our plan. In other states, some legislator got religion and they popped a bill for a public bank. And I've testified in several state legislatures. Those bills aren't going anywhere, really. Maybe 3 will. Because they didn't do any groundwork. They didn't build any kind of foundation. I walked in these hearing rooms, 30 legislators, and they couldn't tell me who was on their side and who wasn't. That's kind of basic stuff. They hadn't done that. So we haven't approached any politician or state legislator and said, we want a bank. Instead, we've been talking to groups like this, to chambers of commerce, to local taxpayers groups, to civic organizations, to local elected officials, building a foundation. And we decided that this is the place to make the fight. I've canvassed this state for 2 years now, and here's what I see. In 2/3 of the state, they've got fracking money, whether you like it or not. The restaurants are full in the morning, tires are being sold, rooms are being rented, banks have some liquidity. So those parts of the state don't feel any urgency right now. They just don't. Other parts of the state, particularly suburbs around Philadelphia, they like the idea, but they're awfully complacent. They got their own little crony capitalist thing going out there, and it's not really urgent. There's some prosperity. They're not really urgent. However, in this city, everybody knows we need something new. Everybody knows it. So we're getting a tremendously good hearing. Council members, controller's office, I met with the mayor's office earlier today. People are listening. We're getting everyone's attention here. So I think this is the place, and why not? This is the home of the first revolution. Why not the second? That's how I see it. Right here, Second American Revolution. This is the place to do it. And we intend to put on Council's desk in February a complete business plan for a public bank in Philadelphia, not some vague proposal. We're approaching Council like they are investors in a startup business, which in fact, we're going to invite them to be. As you look at it, that's what they're going to do. In fact, we're going to ask them to capitalize this bank. So this has to be done just like you're going to investors. You better have a damn good business plan. We're going to have one. At the same time, we'll give Council suggested legislation to enable what we're talking about here. And then Council will do what Council does. You know, we're going to suggest submissions. They may say, oh, no, we'll do this. It's Council, you know. We'll say capitalize it this way. They say, well, maybe, or this way. You know, that's what Council does, and you can't take that role away from them. But we're going to give them very concrete places to start from. So it's not this vague discussion about how could it and what. No, we're going to go with a very solid business plan. 5 years of projections, cash flows, balance sheets, all of it. Projected returns, all of it. Jobs created, all of it. In black and white. So they can see very specifically what we're talking about. And they go from there. And whatever happens, happens. But I think we're going to get a very fair hearing. And I think when we do, it's national news. If the city of Philadelphia starts talking about Public Bank of Philadelphia, that is national news. It is. And so that's what we're trying to do. So before I take questions, we have a short video here that kind of explains this in 12 minutes. There's rather too much of me in this video. I apologize for that, but the guys who shot it thought that was appropriate, so what are you going to do? And this will be going public all over the city on Thursday to our mailing list, to all the media, and trying to frame this issue. On October 12th, we have another very large public banking meeting. Oh, we lost our sound. Hold on a second.
Philadelphia.
Oh, the mission of the bank. In North Dakota, it's rather broad. It's create prosperity, support agriculture, ranching, farming, the economy, blah, blah, blah. And then from year to year, the state legislature tells the bank, do something over here. As this year, for example, they're working with local housing authorities to create housing where they're fracking out in rural North Dakota. That's the mission. They're putting new water systems in, all about the fracking. So that's what the legislature said, do something over here. A couple of years ago, they said, do something about high-tech medicine, and they started investing in high-tech medical stuff. That's what the legislator wanted. So there's a general mission, and it gets modified year to year. And probably a bank here would be something like that. But there may be specific things you want to think about right away. Now, let me caution you. It mentions help the school district, not overnight. If anyone's thinking that this is the pill for the schools, no. Even if we get going, a bank is a year away, at least. So disabuse yourself of the notion that there's an immediate assistance here for the schools. I think there's not, because I haven't found it yet. And I don't want to be promising things that aren't going to happen. So I'm careful about that one. But the other benefits do accrue over time, and they could be directed to your school system. That's absolutely true. And future bond issues could be at far lower interest rates. The Bank of North Dakota buys local bonds, so that if you go out for a bond issue, they go in the market and bid down the interest rate. Or if they take the bond issue, you're paying interest back to your own bank. That's what it means by virtually debt-free infrastructure funding in North Dakota. Either the bank's bidding down the interest rates that someone else buys, or they're taking the deal and they're getting interest right back to the general fund. That's about 40% of any state, city is the debt service, about 40%. It's a huge number. You can get rid of that, you've got suddenly lots of room to maneuver out there. So it can have long-term a very, very important effect on your school system, but not overnight. And I'm not promising that one. So what is the mission? We need to think about that. And then, again, how do we capitalize it? Did you know you have $6.4 billion in investments out there? In corporate bonds, for example, in T-bills, in CDs. 30% of that $6.4 billion is corporate bonds. I'll bet not a nickel of that comes back to this city. Just goes out the door. And it's invested in who knows where. Not here. So that should be new information. And we're working with the Controller's Office to get through by the way, you discover this information, what's called the Consolidated Annual Financial Report, which was all the city's agencies, puts them all on one piece of paper. Some are easy to read, like New York. Some are very hard to read, like Philadelphia. You almost get the opinion that you really don't want you to follow this stuff. For example, you got to really work to figure out which banks are dealing with all that money and getting commissions on account of it. It's really hard to discover, and how much those commissions are for getting very poor returns, I might add. The returns on these investments are just bad. They're not good. So, capitalization and then governance. Those are some of the issues we're going to address over the next couple of months.
So, people have questions for Mike.
Let's start here.
Well, I'm assuming the sole depositor would be the city of Philadelphia.
The Bank of North Dakota, by law, must take deposits, but it doesn't solicit them. It's not in the business of competing with local banks. So in North Dakota, its major deposit, 98%, is the state of North Dakota. Every traffic ticket, every tax, everything goes right in that bank. That's where they put their money. Now, I'm not sure that would happen immediately with the Philadelphia Public Bank. They've grown up over time. One reason, in fairness to council, no one likes banking with Wells Fargo. They rip the city off. But not every local bank can collateralize $400 million. And not every local bank has the capacity to deal with those transactions. The city of Reading, on our recommendation, is forming a new finance corporation. They have $25 million on deposit any given day. They're going to take that out of Wells Fargo, put in their local banks. That's on the way. They're doing that. It's going to take them about 3 months and $300,000 to train up and get the software to deal with an average daily balance of $25 million. This city's got hundreds of millions on deposit. You just don't take that over overnight. So if the city had a public bank, then that public bank could, over 6, 8, 10, 12 months, develop the capacity to manage those size deposits. But it doesn't have it from the get-go. It doesn't. Let's just keep going around. Yes, ma'am.
Why did you say that a public bank wouldn't contribute to solving the school finance?
I said it could not do that immediately.
Could you repeat the question?
The question was, why won't a public bank have a big impact on the school district finances? And that's because it can't be immediate. Over time, yes, it can have a big impact, but not immediately. You've got to, first of all, let's say council decides to do this. In February, we have hearings. Maybe 9 months later, action gets taken after the budget battle. You know how it works. And then, so by 2015.
By definition.
No. It could have a large impact. Let's just keep going around. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I like the idea. I think it looks like a great solution off the top of my head. My question is, how did the North Dakota Bank capitalize?
North Dakota's bank was capitalized with a bond issue of $100 million. They did a general obligation bond issue. Now, we could do that here too, but what a bond issue does is, the bond would be self-liquidated. The bank would pay it off itself, but it depresses your rates of return. They come up like this. But if you don't have that debt to pay off, then you start to see your returns come faster. So that's the difference between capitalizing with a bond issue or out of existing investments. I saw in this morning's Inquirer that the state investment, the state public employees investment fund, they're going to take $50 million out of this investment and put it over here into real estate deals. Probably a bad idea, actually. They're a little late. But the point is that people can move investments around. So we're going to make an argument that this city's $6.4 billion are in underperforming investments. Some fraction of that can be put over here in a higher performing investment that also creates job and tax revenue. It's several benefits here. One is they'll get better. The Bank of North Dakota has posted 17 to 25% returns on equity for the past decade. Yeah, wow, 17 to 25%. We'll come back. The reason is, by the way, it has almost no overhead. There's one office. There are no branches, tellers, ATMs, retail services, none of that stuff. And they're all paid as public service employees. There are no commissions or bonuses for doing stupid, risky things. That's also why they have almost no bad loans. They don't get involved in that crap, long story short. So those returns then come right to the bottom line. All that cost goes away right to the bottom line. That produces those returns. This city's returns are anywhere between 2 and 4%. Unions 4.8%, pension funds, it's really bad returns. We think it's prudent as an investment strategy to take some money out of these underperforming investments and put it over here and get a better return that also has all these other benefits. That's going to be the argument we make at City Council. Let's just going around this way.
The board of the
Excuse me?
Is the board of the bank?
The question is the board of the bank elected? And the answer is I have no idea. Governance will be a vital issue, and how you insulate. It's public money, so it must be accountable. Some elected officials are going to have to account for this sooner somehow. You can't have it both ways. But then you don't want them having any role in hiring the bank, no role in day-to-day management. So you've got to create a governance that is apart from city council and the mayor, maybe appointed and elected by 7-year terms, so they survive mayors and council members. They're not tied to their election cycles. You get a board of governors, and they hire the CEO, and he staffs the bank. No one outside the bank's management hires anybody ever. That kind of stuff. There are ways. There are models. There are lots of models, but that's going to require careful thought. Maybe in this city, maybe there'll also be a citizens advisory board, rather large, that would be a sounding board for the actual 7 or so directors of the bank. Maybe. That gets more input in there. But one thing you get is more transparency. This, as a public institution, it will be audited by your own controller and by the Pennsylvania Department of Banking. You'll get 2 audits of this bank every year. No one here has a clue what Wells Fargo is doing with your deposits, I'm sure. But this bank will be audited publicly because it's public money. So you actually get a fairly high level of transparency, which is good. You'll know what's going on. So, yes, ma'am.
Could you explain more about the interest rate swap that was mentioned?
Well, interest rate swaps, very briefly, back at the end of the Rendell administration, the state legislature allowed cities to invest in swaps. That was illegal up until then. A swap is a bet. Each party bets which way interest rates are going to go. And if they go up, you were protected. If they went down, you lose. Well, guess which way they went. Now, there was a hearing about swaps, and Councilman Kenny did. He was all over this, along with the state auditor general, Jack Wagner. And this state's lost, it's pushing billions of dollars in swaps. School districts right and left, town councils, Philadelphia's not the only place, as a matter of fact. But somebody said, I don't know who it was, that, it could have gone either way. Do you really think Wall Street bankers get paid for selling deals that might go against them? I don't think so. They pay for those sure things. And guess who pushed the interest rates down? The Federal Reserve that they own. The biggest number of swaps are interest rate swaps. If interest rates go up like this in a hurry, you're going to bankrupt Wells Fargo. They'd have to be paying out. The interest rates aren't low to protect jobs. They're low to protect the banks. They're making a killing on interest rate swaps. This city's almost $500 million. That's going on all across America, in every state. It's really big money. And if interest rates should rise suddenly, the 5 biggest banks are in trouble. And that's why interest rates aren't rising. Now you know. It's got nothing to do with jobs whatsoever.
What kind of resistance would you expect from the big banks?
To the death. The question is, what kind of resistance would I expect from the big banks? And they're going to fight. They hold at least $1 trillion of city deposits, at least. And they're using that to collateralize their derivatives. The 5 biggest banks have $700 trillion of derivative exposure. The global GNP is 70 trillion. They got bets of 10 times more the amount of the entire gross domestic product of the world. If those bets start going down, there's trouble in River City, and your deposits may not be safe.
How could we be hopeful?
Because the people are waking up. I don't know about you, but you can just see people had it up to here, and they're beginning to figure it out. This is totally, you'll think it's unrelated, but it's not. The American people were usually against going to war in Syria. Whatever you think about it, the American people did not want to do that. That was pretty clear. Very strong opposition. It might have passed the Senate, but never the House. It was going down. That was the people speaking out because they had it. I feel badly for what happened in Syria, but the American people have just had it. They just have. And you saw the first casualty today. The president withdrew the nomination of Larry Summers to be chairman of the Federal Reserve. Summers, he was the chief architect of all this stuff. He's the guy that told the incoming Mr. Obama, no, don't bother mortgage relief. Let the market take care of it. That was him talking. Guy's a walking disaster. Should be tarred and feathered. And because of what happened to the vote in Syria, the non-vote, Mr. Obama pulled his nomination. He wasn't going to go. That was clear. He wasn't going to fly. The American people are, in fact, waking up. And that's what I see. So I think there'll be a battle. Sure, of course. And the suits will start flying in from Manhattan, you know, but you'll be able to pick them out. They're $3,000 suits, and they got 28-page PowerPoints, you know, and they sell nonsense to you. But you'll know them when you see them, you know. And there'll be a battle, but it'll be a public battle. It will be a public battle. We have public hearings. We're going to be able to ask the treasurer, what is the return on your portion of that? And what fees are you paying to get that return? This will be public. And the only way to prevent this is to defend Wall Street. I wouldn't want that job these days. I really wouldn't. That's a tough sell. And some lobbyists will try. It's going to happen. You know it is. Maybe you get half of the track, they'll run to Harrisburg and try and get the state legislature to come in and prevent you from doing what you want to do. I'm not saying this is easy. I'm saying it's necessary. That's all. This is necessary. It's a good idea. It works. It's worth the fight. And you bump it up to a national discussion. And this city leads the way again. I think that's a nice position to be in. Yes?
Legislatively, what does it take to start a bank?
In Pennsylvania, you need $12 million, what does it take to start a bank? It takes $12 million of Tier 1 capital. Tier 1 means free and clear, unencumbered. No one's got a claim on the money. Little Reading doesn't have that. They got $3 million. That's why they're not forming a bank. They're going to do this other thing and get the deposits out of Wall Street, put them home, and have some way reason to talk to the local banks. They're doing that, but that's because they haven't got $12 million. 8 doctors have formed a bank. 8 lawyers put together $12 million to form a bank. That's what it takes. Now, for a public bank, you've got to make sure you're within statute law, and there's a legal foundation for this. We don't want to get tripped up here. So we are, in fact, researching statute law and the city charter to make sure we form the bank in a way that's fireproof. No one's going to say you're not allowed to do that. In fact, we are. And I think Reading's pioneered that. But this city's got its own charter. We'll do a statute law. But there will be a dogfight when this is city council, absolutely. But if we do a lot of this, you folks talk to your council people. You know, if you come at them from underneath, Wall Street's going to come in from on top, high-level bombing. It's it's a cruise missile version of how to talk to council. They're flying on the lawyers and all those guys, and very impressive. But if you're there under them, all of you talking to your council members, you vote at the end of the day. And lobbyists, unless they live here, don't vote. So it's possible to create a foundation strong enough to withstand the assault of Wall Street, which is certainly coming. If they haven't melted down by then, by the way. Who knows? Just keep going around the room. Yes.
Is there any hope that showing their video and speaking to our civic associations in our neighborhoods would do it?
This video it'll be public. It's going on. It'll be public as of Thursday, and you can download it. You can download it. We're going to circulate that, and you can get it as of Thursday and show it to anybody you want to. And there's a lot of me in that video. I didn't plan it that way, and I feel kind of bad about that. This is not about me. This is very much about this city and its future, and it's about democracy. It really is. This is it's time. Take back some control. We say take back control of your money. Well, that's a pretty way to start democracy. Take control of your own money. Take it back from the Wall Street banks, and you decide what to do with it. And that's what we're trying to get. We're trying to get broadly understood in the city and get under council members so that you are lifting them up and you're giving them the reason to do this.
5
Yes.
minutes more of questions, and we're going to talk among ourselves.
Let's go over here.
Is this something we could bring to WHYY?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We have compiled, our group here in Pennsylvania is 2 years old. And we've been all volunteer, by the way. It's been an entirely volunteer effort for the past 2 years. The fellow whose voice you heard is, in fact, a quite famous radio announcer, old NPR guy. He's a voice here in 1,000 commercials. He emceed the city's, the big gig at the Academy of Music some months back. He's well known for this stuff. He knows a lot of media, and we put together a pretty good media contact list, and we're going to start working them professionally, full time, driving this message home, like DeStefano at the Inquirer and all the rest of them. And if you know local newspaper guys, just put it out there. Just put it out there. Any way we get the word out is a good way to get the word out. So we're heading in that direction. Yes.
So is
Let's go to the uninsured for a couple of units.
Yeah, is this an FDIC insured or is it self-insured?
Self-insured.
Self-insured.
Because it holds all the deposits in North Dakota. That FDIC is $250,000. It's useless. Yes, in the back.
So we've been trying to do something similar to this with DAF, Building American Future, with Airedale. What is the difference between this type of bank and the infrastructure banks that we've been trying to push?
Okay. The difference is, what is the difference between this kind of bank and an infrastructure bank? And the difference is, one, this is self-sustaining. It doesn't start with an appropriation. It starts with an investment of capital. It earns money, which replenishes that capital. It leverages that money, so it has almost infinite funds. It can keep lending against its reserves to about 10-to-1 ratio. It is not appropriations based, and it's not just limited to infrastructure. The mission of a public bank can be quite broad. It can be disaster relief, for example. It can be student loans, for example. Here is one idea being floated out there. Right now, the private bank loans, not the Stafford loans for students, but the private bank loans, if they go into default, the federal government buys those loans back at 97 cents on the dollar. It goes to Citibank and takes its loan. It then sends that loan, let's say it's for $60,000, to a bill collector who tries to get it paid. And typically, they might eventually get 40% less 20% fees. So on that $60,000 note that the government picked up from Citibank, at best it might see $19,000, maybe. An alternative is for the Fed to take that loan, then give it to the local public bank. Let's say a bank in Philadelphia. Now it has the loan. It can, because it doesn't need 20% returns, it can renegotiate principal and interest to make that affordable for the student who also is unemployed. With that loan comes a $30,000 appropriation from the federal government to your Citibank, and that goes out at $10 an hour for 18 months to give that student a job being trained for work. So now you've got a student who's got affordable loan payments, he's got a job, he's paying taxes, and he's also making some loan payments on his outstanding debt that was renegotiated. That is the Higher Education Act is up in 14. And that legislation is going to go before the Congress to see if we can make that fly. I don't know. But it can do that kind of thing. So the public bank has a broader mission than just infrastructure, and it depends on what you want it to be. It's not based on appropriations. It partners with infrastructure banks if you want to. And it's not only for the big ticket item. Typically, infrastructure banks are big ticket items. 30 million, 40 million. This is local loans from your local bank, fueling the economy with a small bore kind of stuff. So it has its mission and its impacts are more varied. It enables a whole lot of local small scale lending, not just the typical big ticket items for infrastructure banks, typically. So those are some of the differences, depending on how you define the mission. Let me go to the red shirt, though. Yes?
There are a lot of other sort of NGO groups in the city, University of Pennsylvania, hospitals and unions. There's a lot of extra money. Could they also?
The question is, could entities other than the city invest in this bank? Well, it could. There would be less of a public bank, and you'd have to share the profits. If you took capital from, I don't know, from unions, for example, they got a lot of money, then you'd be sharing the profits. It may be that you think it's a good idea. What the essential feature of the kind of bank we're talking about is it is not a commercial bank. It does not compete with the commercial bank industry. It partners with the commercial bank, credit union, and development agencies. It partners with them to maximize what they're doing. So if it's not impossible that if council says we're going to start a bank, the unions say, oh, the unions say we want in. We got lots of money. We'll take a 20% share. It could happen. You know, who knows? It wouldn't be illegal.
It seems a lot of overlap.
For example, the suggestion has been made that the unions would want to participate in this kind of a bank. It's actually on the table, that discussion. I don't know if it's going to come through or not. I don't think it really matters. It could. When you get to council and you present a business plan, then whatever happens, happens. They're going to have their say. It's your city council. So what's going to come out the far end of this, we know generally what we think it should look like, but specifically, it's not my call.
It might increase the political viability.
Getting others to buy in might very well do exactly that. But that requires, for example, the city's investment, the city just itself, that's the treasurer. Other investments are controlled by the pension fund board, whatever it's called.
Board of Retirement and Pensions.
They control some money. Gasworks has got money. It's a lot of money floating around out there. And we're going to try and zero in on an amount we think is appropriate to capitalize the bank so it really begins to have impact. Just think for a second. If the total investments of the city and its agencies are $6.4 billion, okay, 5% of that is $320 million. A bank capitalized at $320 million is a big, bad bank. Big and bad. And has the capacity to loan 10 times that, leveraging into your economy. That's $3.2 billion of loans. That's big. In a city of this size, that's a lot. Well, is it crazy to take 5% of your underperforming assets and put them over here in a bank? I don't think so. Well, that's the argument we're going to make, and we'll see what council says about that. We think it's a pretty good argument. But it could be a lesser amount. You know, the thing would be to get the bank up and running and functioning. That would be the trick. Yeah, well, we'll take 2 more questions, Stan.
Well, let me ask you, so we've run a bit over at 7:15. How many people want to break up into small groups and brainstorm a little bit? Let me see hands.
I think answering the questions.
That's not, okay, all right. So there's going to be, we'll take some more questions
Okay.
for another 5 or 10 minutes. You should speak a little bit about the event. There's going to be another event on October 5th, which is especially going to be around
October 12th.
October 12th.
Okay.
About getting citizen input into what
We're playing a workshop at the Art Street United Methodist Church, you all know where that is, on North Broad, on October the 12th. It'll be a day-long workshop from about 8:30 coffee to 3:30. We're going to describe in some detail what the Bank of North Dakota does. If you're interested, by the way, you go to their website and look for their 2012 annual report, and the whole range of it's an astounding range of programs to lend into the economy. And that's the difference between the infrastructure bank. This is really broad. They have all kinds of small investments all over the place, not just about infrastructure. It's really an enabler. What we have going for us still is diversity. The country's got great diversity. If you can enable that diversity, you got a good thing going there. So this bank we pose as an enabler of the diversity of this community. You know, I want to know what every single community development corporation, what every single CDC wants to do away with mission. I want to hear what they have to say. You know, people. I want to hear what the folks in power have to say. People on the ground in the neighborhood. I want to know what we're trying to get from you all your idea of what a public bank should look like. What should its mission be? And if we can do that, we've got a real grassroots expression of what the bank should be, and we get before council with a strong presentation of mission. Because mission is number one. You got to define mission, and the rest kind of works around that. So more questions, all the back.
Would the city council individuals be able to get their fingers in the pie?
Well, the question is, would the city council individuals, no names, be able to get their fingers in the pie? I met with a couple members of council, and one said, you know, we'd like to have a bank, and I thought, I bet you would, but that's not quite what not quite what we had in mind, you know. And this is the issue of governance. This is a very serious issue. There have been development banks in other cities, and sadly, they came under the control of council members, what have you. And this guy got a loan, and you know why, and this guy got a loan, and a bank went belly up. It does not take long to ruin a bank. Just make enough bad loans in a hurry, you're done. So it's vital that this bank is run by bankers on a very tight mission. There must be accountability. You know, the people have to be able to go to a mayor, council, and say, you know, we want the bank to do this next year. There's got to be a room for that. And if for some reason the management screws up, someone's got to be able to get rid of them for cause. You know, that is necessary. And that goes back to your political authority. But you can't have it both ways. Oh, those nasty politicians. On the other hand, oh, let's give it to the experts, like the Federal Reserve. And it work out so good. So there has to be a balance between accountability and independence, and we'll find that balance. I think there's enough. Everybody here understands that issue. Everybody. And there's no one I talk to who doesn't get that issue. So that being the case, you know, we'll figure that one out and give council some recommendations on how to create an accountable but independent management. And that's the trick. We'll get there, but they know that we'll have to, because otherwise the bank will fail. Dan.
Marketing this process, we have neighborhoods in Philadelphia that draw 2 or 3 times this size crowd. but they're not finding out about this. I had to hear about it, even though I've been connected with you.
Uh-huh.
I didn't hear about it through you or any of the channels that were before.
We are just at the beginning of this networking. This is a long process. I mean, this is, we had an earlier event at Drexel University. We had another at SEIU. The numbers keep going up. We'll have this thing on October the 12th, all-day forum. We have reached out to the CDCs. We reached out to the Association of CDs. We reached out to the Urban Coalition. We reached out to the group at Power. We're reaching out wherever we can to begin to network this idea. We've talked to the controller. We've talked to the mayor's office. We've talked to council members. We've put together a fairly decent list of contacts in the city, and we're starting to build that list. And when you get this video, if you think to, send it out there. And it'll come with information about this hearing. We're trying to get 150 people, representative of the city's organization and neighborhoods, to come together and have a day-long discussion of mission. That's really the purpose of the meeting on the 12th, is to really focus on mission. When we show you what the BND does, what does that make sense to you? What do you want the bank to do in this city? And try and create a decent mission statement. Yes, ma'am.
Can you go through the ownership again? How do you determine the ownership?
The question is, how do you determine ownership? And that's just a question of who the shareholders are. If the city uses its investments to form a bank, the city is the sole owner. And that means you are. It's your investment money. It came out of your taxes, your fees, what have you. It's your money, one way or the other. It came from you. You would be the sole owner. So, for example, the Bank of North Dakota was capitalized with a bond issue put by the bank, so the state is the only owner of the bank. And so it gets the dividends, as it were. It doesn't go out to 1,000 shareholders. It goes all into the state's treasury. If there's a discussion in some cities in Pennsylvania, poor ones, to form like a mutual bank. Each city would put in some of its capital, and that way they get to $12 billion. Well, then they'd have to portion the profits accordingly. If the town A put in 25% of the money, then town A should see 25% of the returns. It would also want to vote. It gets a little complicated when you get multiple shareholders, because then you got to allow for that in your board. You got to share your profits out. It can be done. We're arguing for a much simpler, cleaner, completely city-owned bank, so that you all are the people of Philadelphia, are the shareholders, expressed by your government, and all the profits go to your general fund as non-tax revenue. I'll say it again. When you're talking to politicians, non-tax revenue. That's a good thing. Yes, ma'am.
Let's say the city puts the money in. So that's when you get the politicians who feel like they have to say over what's going on in the bank. I created a bank, that's why I know.
Okay, all right. Well,
we made a mission where we made sure there were not politicians in the bank.
Okay, well, here's a banker. Again, the question is, how do you maintain the independence of your bank?
Yeah.
And that's all in how you structure the governance. What your charter says, what your law says, what the council ordinance says, those things must be very specific. That conversation we're having it here tonight. I've had it with the controller, I've had it with council members. That is an important conversation. So we've got to bring the mission strand and the capitalization strand and the governance strand and the accountability strand all together in a written document called a business plan to put on council's desk in February for hearings. And I think we will get those hearings, by the way. That's going to happen. And that will be national news. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, this bank that's already a public bank is in North
Dakota.
Okay, I don't know anybody from North Dakota. If we have questions, I would like to question the people who have a successful public bank and ask them how they run it.
It is.
Because here, and it won't be exactly the same.
Okay.
But it's an idea that there is a public bank that is successful.
The question is, how can we talk to the Bank of North Dakota to get what they've done? Well, I tried that. And they don't want to talk. Their response was, love to help it, but we have a bank to run. Because they're getting a lot of questions. Their phones are ringing off the hook. This is out there now. Right. And so I called the president, Eric Hardemeyer. He said, go to my public information guy. I went to him and said, really, Mike, love to help you, baby, but we have a bank to run. Okay, but we have, as consultants, 2 retired senior officers of the Bank of North Dakota who are advising us. Ed Saith is the lead guy. He'll probably be here on the 12th. We already have some of their management retired who are free to talk on our advisory board. And they are, and we also have, by the way, and I want you, a group of local bankers who have agreed that when we get the business plan, we're going to show it to them. And they're going to vet it. They're going to say, no, for startup, you don't need this and this, you need this and that. Someone who's run a bank. We're going to say, here's the mission, here's the capital. How many people do we need to start this bank up? We need a CEO, a loan officer, a risk manager, an investment, I don't know. I'm not a banker. Bankers will tell us what we need in the way of startup staff to make this bank work. So we're vetting all this stuff. Well, I trust the right people. I trust.
Thank you. They have in Philadelphia, not just the city proper, but in the suburban counties that surround the city, a lot of old money that might see this as an opportunity to really improve the situation in Philadelphia without.
That's interesting because I actually had a cocktail party with old money about 2 months ago, and I said, "Give us some." So we can. Oh no! I mean, we have been an all volunteer effort, and that's not going to fly. And you can't get this. This is going to take some actual a staff person or two. We have a lot of work to do here, and we are paying the guy who's looking at your CAFRs to analyze that and tell us what's going on. We're paying for that, and we're going to have to support some legal work here. This is important stuff, and we have communications work to do. We're going to have some speakers come in from out of state on the 12th. We're going to pay their expenses and put them on a hotel. This has to be done. So, by the way, when you go to our website, I'll tell you what happened. We had our first match grant for $5,000. We have to match it, and we got 10. When I got that 10, I'm going back to that old money I mentioned earlier. There's another 10 out there. Now I pay for the business plan. That's basically what we're doing here. So when you go to the website, there's a PayPal button. If you want to make a contribution, please do. Right now I got to match $5,000. Then we've got 10. I've already started the work. I said, yeah, we'll pay you. I just can't wait. There's no time to wait. So I already got people working out there. And I said, yes, we're going to give you so many dollars an hour and get going. And they're doing it. And we will raise the money and we'll pay for this. So we'll have a really solid presentation to take to council.
If you do have this bank launched, will individual members of the city be able to become
The question is, can individuals be a depositor in the bank? In North Dakota, by law, the bank must take individual deposits, but it does not seek them because it doesn't want to go to war with the community banks. It wants to, and it has not. We've interviewed bankers all across North Dakota. Here's what they say. With the BND, we go toe-to-toe with the big boys. We're taking the $60 million deals. They say, quote, when the credit crunch hit, they never blinked and they kept the credit flowing, quote unquote. The banks in North Dakota love the Bank of North Dakota. We want that same thing here. So we are staying well away from any competition with the existing banking industry. Because if that were in the offing, it would never happen. It would never happen. We can survive Wall Street's assault, but if the community banks on our side, this is going nowhere. As a practical matter, it just isn't. This helps community banks, and as they understand that, they're saying, okay, right, good, count me in, you know? That's the reaction we're getting when they understand this. But if we offer competition, they go, I got Wells Fargo to compete with. I don't need another bank to compete with. We want them to take back market share. So we're very much in the business of helping the community banks. Very much. Other questions?
Thanks, everybody. Okay, there are a couple more. We're wrap it up.
There's the whole municipal bond world. This isn't touching that, right? Because my understanding was muni bonds were 98% owned by investment banks.
The muni bond business is no. Lots of individual investors have muni bonds because they've been considered very safe. Until Detroit, they're considered absolutely golden. And so lots of folks, moms and pops, you'd be surprised how many people have muni bonds. They're all over the place. The biggest dealers tend to be the biggest banks, of course. Of course, they tend to be the biggest dealer. And the bond work. From that, so we don't get stuck in that target. The way a public bank can impact on the bond market is, as I described earlier. In North Dakota, the public bank goes in when, let's say, the town of Bismarck has a bond issue for something. The Bank of North Dakota can bid on that bond issue and bid the interest down. Oh, right. So let's say Wells says, I'll take it at 8%. B&D says, we'll take it at 3%. Oh, well, that's what they do. And if they do take it, you're paying the interest back to yourself because it goes into your general fund because you own the bank that's got the bonds. So it has a huge impact on debt service costs in North Dakota. The new Bay Bridge in San Francisco, what's that, $6 billion bridge, and the same amount of interest. The interest costs are the same as the cost of building that bridge. That's astounding.
Yes.
And it's more like 60 billion, but I picked a number.
Matt Taibbi had a great article in Rolling Stone about how Wall Street banks do just the opposite. They collude together to bid the price up.
They rig the bond market. They rig the LIBOR rates. They rig the mortgages. They rigged everything. I mean, it's a criminal conspiracy, and they got away with it. And apparently they're going to go on getting away with it. The banks, the biggest banks, now have even more money and more share of the market than they had before Dodd-Frank. The concentration has gotten just worse. This is a disaster waiting to happen, just waiting to happen. And I just hope we get this up and running before it happens. But one way or the other, we need, I believe, to depart from the old ways of doing things. They're not working. They're just not. So, okay, what's new out there? This actually isn't new. It's unknown, but it's proved. It's proved. One last thought. 60%, no, I'm sorry, globally, 40% of the market is in public banks. The nations whose economies did not melt down, Brazil, Russia, India, China, Japan, they have public banks. Germany had it for decades. They have public banks, and they didn't melt down. They got hurt because we stopped buying. We stopped importing. I know that. That was my business, moving freight around the world. We stopped importing. That hurt them. But Brazil, Russia, India, China, Japan, with big public banks, did not collapse the way we did, because 40% of the market was insulated from that nonsense. They were just doing banking things, lending money at affordable rates and making profits on the loans.
They're creating their own local currency.
Well, there's that too. There's a lot to know about banking that I never know. Before I stop, I'll show you one more story. I think it's a great story. This Commonwealth had a public bank as a colony, a very successful public bank. This city loaned its money into the economy. The interest came back in lieu of taxes. It was working so well. It's a great story. Ben Franklin went to London in like 1754, let the cat out of the bag. He looked around and said, "You've got terrible poverty here. You got all these rich lords. It looks like we're getting to look again. The very few with a whole lot of money, that's the aristocracy, and everybody else with a small middle class." That's what Franklin saw. This is it. We don't have this kind of poverty in Pennsylvania. And others saw Pennsylvania very prosperous. How do you do that? He said, well, we print our own money. You do what? You're not taking the Bank of England notes. You're not getting the money from the Bank of England and paying interest on that money before it goes. No, we print our own. And 6 months later, the Parliament shut that down. When the bankers in England understood just how we'd managed our own prosperity by not being tied into the Bank of England, by creating our own currency, they said, we can't do that. And that's two issues really historically have torn this nation apart. One was slavery, one was banking. Big battles over the years. Jefferson, Jackson, Lincoln fought huge battles with the banks. They understood that if you get your money from a private banking cartel at interest, it's going to cost a fortune. Whereas if you print your own money away from those guys, it doesn't cost a fortune. I mean, the bankers wanted Lincoln to pay 30% interest rates for the Civil War. He said no. He started printing greenbacks by the federal government. This dollar bill in here, it says clearly Federal Reserve note. It's created by a private banking cartel at interest. These have been big battles throughout our history, huge battles, going back to Franklin and right in the present times. And the creation of the Federal Reserve was, in my opinion, the greatest con job ever pulled. It's not federal. It gets no appropriation from Congress. How does it afford all those magnificent buildings and thousands of staff people? Where's that money come from? They're making a lot of money on you. I mean, you have effectively, we all have a tax on our money. Our money's taxed. Before you pay taxes with your money, that money has been taxed. And that tax is paid the banking cartel that owns the Federal Reserve, just as the Bank of England owns English banking.
This is really going to be the last question.
It's not just a question. Last night, I was part of a discussion group about Ellen Brown's book, The Web of Debt, and I had 15 people learn about the book because they all bought it and read it. I would love to see more of that happen, and I would love to see you tell people how you got involved. You mentioned Ellen's book when you first started talking, but I think people here should know there is this wonderful book about the history of money in the United States, written by Ellen Brown. You should get a copy and read it.
There are two. She wrote Web of Debt, which describes this problem, and now just out is the Public Bank Solution. And that's out now. And it describes the whole history of public banking in this country and globally. And it's an education. I mean, you'll find out that public banking has been working quite well in lots of countries, and that the bankers who own the Federal Reserve just hate it because it cuts them out of the interest game. It really does. It doesn't put them out of business, but it takes a certain part of the business away from them and gives it back to the public. And you'll stop paying for the privilege of having your money, basically. But most people don't understand the way money's created. And I can't do that tonight. It very much depends on you widening the circle to your friends and neighbors. That's how these things get done. If
So
you...
we're going to put you all, we already have a listserv of people who are interested in a new economy in Philadelphia. We're going to add you all to that listserv. If that's okay with you all?
Yes.
And we're going to send out an email which is going to include the names of Ellen's books and also some links, some web links to the Public Banking Institute, the Pennsylvania Project, and whatever else seems to make sense.
Details of the October 12th meeting.
And
Yes,
details
that's
of the
coming.
October
I
12th.
can send that to my neighborhood listserv.
That'll be out on Thursday. All the time, place, all that stuff.
And the
This
link to
link-
your video.
Yes.
So we'll send it out as soon as this is available. So that link will be in the email, and you can start sending it around post haste.
And by the way, Rudy and Kathy are the people who put these videos together. And so I think you want to acknowledge their work. It's, you know, we're using such tools as we have.
Thanks so much. We can have an informal conversation.
Sure.
but the formal part is adjourned. Thanks for coming out.
Let me just see.
All right,